Hello friends, and welcome back to Maple Bay Potager. My name is Faye and I garden here in central Alberta, Canada in about a zone 3-4. So we are pretty far north and it's pretty cold. We are in the second week of May and my last average expected frost is about May 21st where I live. I generally won't be planting any kind of cold sensitive crops out before the last week of May or the first week of June. Things like my peppers, I usually don't plant before the second week of June. So we still have lots of time. It's still very much seed starting time where I live. I know that that is different from most places in the world because we are colder than most places in the world. Today I am starting my squash, my pumpkins, my summer squash, cucumbers, and some flowers, and I'm also going to be trying some watermelon, which is something I haven't tried in years, so I'm really excited about that. So come along, I'm going to show you how I do all of this in soil blocks, because as I say, it is a little ways away from our last average expected frost date. So it is too cold still to be planting these things outside. I like to get a bit of a head start on these things. Even though these don't generally like to be transplanted, they don't like to have their roots disturbed. I find that planting them out in the soil blocks really helps with that. You're not really disturbing the roots. And I've had really good luck doing this. So I'm gonna show you how I do this because I don't think I've seen anybody else that I can think of do it this way. So I'm gonna show you what I do and I have had good success doing this. So, if you don't know, this is a soil blocker, and this is a metal tool that is used to compress wet soil into little soil blocks for seed starting. So, a soil block looks like this, and that is just compressed moist soil. So my soil blocker here, this is the 1.5 inch square soil blocker, and I bought this from West Coast Seeds, I think 3 years ago now. And I think when I bought it, it was like $45 or so. I know that manufacturing costs have gone up, and I think they're up to like 60 now, and that's Canadian. But the nice thing about a tool like this is it is well made. As long as I take care of this, I should only have to buy one, versus starting in plastic trays. I have found that the quality of the plastic trays has just really gone down over the years, and I'm finding that any kind of these 10-20 trays, I'm just gonna hold this up so you can see what I'm talking about, but your typical cheap garden center special plastic tray, they're a few dollars each. I'm finding that my newest trays are the ones that I'm having to replace. Like, they're just making them really flimsy. So basically, I think that it is a very worthwhile investment to invest in a tool like this that is gonna last. Like I say, this should be the only one I ever have to buy, provided I look after it. And then I have also bought these plastic cafeteria trays. I just ordered them online, and they're quite a strong plastic. And I've had those now for the 3 years that I've had the soil blocker for, and they're lasting great. With this size, the 1.5 inch cubed soil blocker, you can also order inserts that go in there, and they are the same size as the micro soil blocker, which I can't remember what the measurement is. I want to say it's like 3/4 of an inch squared or something like that. But they're these little cuties. And so when it comes time for potting up your little tiny micro soil block, you can use those inserts to make a block where that will fit in there, if you can see that. And then your plant is potted up. So today, to plant my squash, I'm going to be using the 1.5 inch soil blocker with the insert. as well as some micro soil blocks, and I'll show you how I do this. So first off, I'm going to change out the little nubs in my soil blocker for the inserts that match the micro soil blocks. And so to do that, they just have these little plastic tabs that you pinch, and then those just come right out of there. You can see how they hook into the holes. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I can just take these ones and they click in. And now that's in there. So I'll do the other three. So I've made most of my soil blocks in advance, but I just wanted to show you a demonstration on these last 2 rows before we get everything planted up. So I have compressed against the flat bottom of my little wash tub here, my soil in my soil blocker. I'm just gonna make sure that I have a flat bottom on these soil blocks because I don't want them rocking around and tipping over. And I'm gonna press these soil blocks onto this tray because even though they say that they're 1.5 inch square, I do find that they are slightly narrower one way, and the way that I have them in my tray here, they are going the opposite way of the way that the soil blocker would fit in the tray, if that makes sense. So I do find it tends to be a little stickier, like you can see that there's soil sticking on the edges here. For some reason, with the little inserts, I think just because there's more surface area, the soil does tend to get kind of stuck in there a little bit more than when I'm just making the blocks without the inserts. So that is admittedly kind of annoying. It's probably, if I had to guess, the soil that I'm using. This is the Pro Mix with the mycorrhizae. I think the one I have right now is HP, which I think is the high porosity, and it has a lot of, I think it's perlite, and it's kind of big pieces. And I think that the soil blocker doesn't like that, and I don't have a fine enough sieve to sieve those out. The last bag of soil that I bought of the same stuff didn't have such big pieces of perlite, so that was a little disappointing this year, and I do think that's why my soil blocks are sticking. I really like that Pro Mix soil with the mycorrhizae because it has the mycorrhizae in it. So I probably will continue to buy that, but that means I will probably continue to be annoyed that my soil blocks are sticking. So I'm just going to transfer my soil blocks over to where I'm going to actually have them planted here. So the indicators that I look for when I'm doing this for when I have enough soil in the blocker is I want to see water coming out of the top cracks of all of these blocks. I do find that you kind of have to shimmy a little more soil into these side blocks than the middle ones. The middle ones are easy to fill, but the side blocks can be a little trickier. So I try and focus on getting soil in those ones. So you want to see that water coming out the top of all of these. And you want this to feel quite heavy, like heavier than you think it should be able to feel. So So I'm gonna put a little more in here because it's not quite there yet. Yeah, that's feeling good. Use my putty knife. So that's all I'm using here is just a putty knife that was a couple of dollars, I think at the dollar store actually. And this is not necessary, but I do find it helpful. I like to put my blocker on my surface and then push down on the handle a few times to just really compress those blocks. And then I like to pull that up and then I like to push down again. Yeah, that soil's a bit wet. You don't really want to see that much water coming out of there. Come on, baby. Let go. Yeah, that'll do. Definitely not my best work, but I have made literally thousands of soil blocks this season, and I am kind of okay with these being the last ones I have to make. I do love soil blocks. I will continue to use soil blocks. Some of the downsides I would say is that you do have to make them. It's not like a pot that's just ready to go. But the upside of that is then you do not have a pot to wash at the end of the season. All I have to wash is these trays. And now we're gonna make some mini soil blocks. I usually like to wear gloves when I'm doing this, but because I was just doing a couple of rows for demonstration, I don't have my gloves on. But I do find if you are making a lot of soil blocks at one time, gloves are helpful. Otherwise, it can be pretty hard on your hands and you can get blisters from the repetitive motion because it is just made of solid metal. Same thing, I just want to pack as much as I can in there. And same thing. Push down a couple times. Really compress that. And those ones are a lot easier. I would say that the soil blocks with the inserts are probably the hardest ones to make. And I definitely didn't do a very good job today, so. But like I say, I think that's more to do with my soil and me just kind of being in a rush and not wanting to improve what needs to be improved. All right, so I'm gonna show you how I use my soil blocks to plant things like squash or watermelon that need to be planted a little bit deeper in the soil. So here I'm gonna be planting all of my winter squash and my pumpkins, my zucchini, and some watermelon. I'm gonna be planting a lot of squash this year. And so you can see that I've used the insert. I'm gonna put my seeds into my hole. These are spaghetti squash, which are one of my favorite winter storage squash. I had a squash that I grew in 2024 just stored in my kitchen for almost 18 months, so a year and a half, without like any kind of preservation at all. It just was picked, cured, and sat in my kitchen for 18 months. I don't know if you would want to eat it after 18 months, but it probably is safe to eat if you had to eat it. So I'm putting 1 squash seed in most of these. I'm gonna put 2 in a couple because this is older seed, just in case one of those seeds doesn't germinate, because I am only planting 1 extra soil block, extra from what I'm planning on planting into the garden. So now that I have all my seeds in my soil blocks, I'm gonna take a mini soil block and put it upside down. Oh, this soil block, I guess. It's one of the ones I didn't make very well. And there's my squash planted. So you don't just have to use the micro blocks and the inserts for potting up. You can also use it for planting things that need to be planted a little bit deeper than I think that the little, what is this? I don't know what you would call this. That this little thing is probably, I don't know, 1/2 inch or so deep. So for my cucumbers, I'm gonna just plant them using that regular insert, not this micro block insert. Because cucumber seeds only need to be planted 1/2 inch deep. So I talked about a couple of the downsides of soil blocking being that you have to make them. They're not just a ready to go pot. And that can be kind of hard on your hands to make them, especially if you have arthritis or anything like that. Some of the other downsides of soil blocks is that they need a lot of water. They have more surface area than just a regular tray of soil. It's not so bad when you have the deeper trays like this one, but on the more shallow cafeteria trays, they tend to dry out quite fast. The micros especially dry out really fast. I'm usually watering my micro soil blocks twice a day, or checking them for water at least like once every 12 hours. Because if you don't check them and they need water, they're not gonna survive another 12 hours. They do dry out quite fast. And then the other downside I think would be the cost of the soil blocker itself. But I do think that that evens out in how much money you're gonna save not buying cheap plastic pots, as well as the plastic pots that will last you are very, very, very expensive. So it's definitely cheaper than investing in those. And that's actually why I ended up trying the soil blocker initially. Was I was thinking that I should just invest in some good quality plastic pots and trays that would last me. But they were so expensive, I just couldn't justify spending that much money. And so I thought, you know what, I'll spend the like 45 bucks and see what I think of the soil blocker. And I just couldn't believe how much better the plants did. And I really like that it's less plastic, that long term it's less investment. One of my favorite things about soil blocks is that when you plant in soil blocks, one of the benefits and why the plants do so well is something happens called air pruning, where when those roots hit the side of that soil block, instead of the way in a pot they will go around and start to get root bound, they just air prune. So that root stops growing and it triggers to the plant to produce more roots. So you end up with kind of a similar effect to like if you pinch a snapdragon back, where you get a bushier plant. The air pruning kind of gives you like a bushier root system where as soon as you plant this out into the garden, those roots just take off. They're not going to be root bound. You have a big healthy root system and a nice healthy little plant, and they also don't get any transplant shock in my experience. So I really like this method for, like I say, starting things like squash, cucumbers, melons, things like sunflowers, just anything that doesn't like to have its roots disturbed. I find that this method, they don't seem bothered by at all because you're not disturbing the roots. I also like that this is very customizable year to year. I don't always start the same amount every year, and I can very easily, well, maybe I shouldn't say easily, for no additional cost, like money-wise, I can make exponentially more things to start seeds in, more soil blocks. Where with pots, I would have to go and purchase more if I want to start more. On the flip side of that, the more that I want to start, the more blocks I have to make and the more time that takes. I also really like that soil blocks are quite space efficient underneath the grow lights. I like that they're square and I can pack them into my trays versus like a round pot. I feel like it's not an efficient way to use the space, especially under grow lights. Maybe that's not such a big issue if you're growing in a greenhouse and have lots of space, but I don't, and I pay for the electricity, and electricity is not cheap, so I don't really like to run my lights more than I have to or have more lights running than I have to. So I do find that the soil blocks are really great that way. Very efficient use of space under your grow lights on your shelves. So I have planted my spaghetti squash. I don't think I mentioned, but I did plant one of my varieties of cucumber in here, which actually I probably planted that a little too deep, but we'll see what happens, I guess. But I'm planting, for the first time, I think, straight 8 cucumbers. So like a slicing cucumber instead of just a pickling cucumber. I don't think I've ever grown any cucumbers that weren't a pickling variety before this. So that I am actually growing for my partner. He is going to be growing a little garden in one of my garden beds this year and wanted cucumbers for Greek salad. So I'm going to be growing him some of those straight 8 cucumbers. I've also planted zucchini. This is kaboka squash, I hope. I've saved this off of plants that grew in my garden last year, and I did not isolate the blossoms. So with squash, if you want to save the seeds and make sure that it is not cross-pollinated and you're growing multiple varieties, you do need to isolate the blossom with, like, some people use just a paper bag, just something to cover it so that insects can't get into that particular female blossom and pollinate it, so that when you go outside, you can grab a male blossom and hand pollinate it and then keep that blossom covered to know that it won't be cross-pollinated. Squash cross-pollinate very readily. You can also avoid that, like, if you don't want to be isolating blossoms, you can avoid cross-pollination by either just growing one variety of squash or growing one type in the different varieties of squash, because the different families of squash will not cross-pollinate with each other. So I think there's like Cucurbita muscata will not cross-pollinate with Cucurbita maxima. So you can look at the Latin genus of your squash and plant one in each genus, and those will not cross-pollinate, and then you can safely save those seeds. Well, not safely, but you can save those seeds and know what you're going to get from those seeds. But I did not do any of those things, and so this very well may be a cross, and we're just going to find out. But the plants that I saved it from were kaboka, which is a Japanese little dense green pumpkin type squash. They have a very low water content. I haven't been able to grow them very large in my garden yet. I'm hoping to change that. But I really like that they have a low water content. So even if they're a small squash, they usually have a pretty good weight to them. These are seeds that were gifted to me. Well, they're from pumpkins that were gifted to me, and I saved the seeds out of. One of my friends has grown these pumpkins in her garden for a couple of generations, and in their garden they only grow the one variety, and I have grown these seeds like from these seeds last year, and they were pumpkins. So I'm pretty confident that these are not cross-pollinated. And the pumpkins that she gave me were huge. So I'm hoping to get good pumpkins this year. I'm not great at growing winter squash. I think that maybe I don't feed it enough, or maybe I'm planting it in spots that it doesn't like. So this year I'm planting it in a new spot. I've never planted winter squash before, but I have had summer squash grow in the bed that my winter squash will be in, and the summer squash did really well there. So I'm hoping the winter squash likes it there too. And if you don't know, pumpkins are a kind of winter squash. So I'm saying winter squash as a broad term, but pumpkins are technically a winter squash. Hey friends, editing Kayla here. The video was just getting way too long, so I have split it into 2 parts, and the second part will be up next week, and we will be planting the watermelon, cucumbers, and all of the flowers. And I will be discussing some more of the benefits and things that I like about soil blocking, and some just different seed starting tips. So stay tuned for that. And I wanted to say thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye, friends.